this balance at the festival of the voices of admissions and the voices of careers, and some real positive messages both for the intake and for the outcomes. And I'm sure with the wonderful schools and the guests that we have for this career services panel, it will be no different. I'm delighted to welcome Abigail, Assistant Dean of Career Development at the Yale School of Management. Lovely to have you back again, Abigail. And joining her from Raleigh, from Durham, North Carolina, we've got Ed Bernier, who's the Assistant Dean for the Daytime MBA Career Service. See you, Ed. And Courtney Giese, who is the Career and Employment Development Manager at Case Western. So all three of you, thank you for being with us. We sort of said, well, you know, the summer's done, that class of 2021, and now we're thinking about next year already. But Abigail, let's just sort of look at the summer and that graduating class and some of the outcomes. You said before we went live, you know, it wasn't easy, but there are some great results that you've observed.
Absolutely. So our data is not final yet, so I can't give any details on that. But I can say the graduating class did amazingly well. And what I was commenting on before is they across industries, across geographies, really whether you look at salaries or actual just percentage employed, they're very strong. What's missing in those numbers is how much work that took for the students, and really that it was a very different experience for them. And they were in many ways pioneers doing this for the first time in this very different world. And so I think that it's important to look at not just where they landed, but also what got them there. And I think that also probably led to some of them making different choices than they may have a few years ago.
Right. And I'd sort of said to you, they haven't been able to take anything for granted. As you've watched them, even over that 2-year span of so much uncertainty, and what have you seen? Those that have really thrived have shown the sort of the resilience, the adaptability to these different conditions.
Definitely, the ones who sort of just roll with the punches and oh, no different. We're just going to do this, and okay, so I'm doing it remotely instead of in person. Or looked at the glass half full people. Oh, I don't have to travel so much. I don't have to go to all these interviews. I can do them all from New Haven, and I can have more of them and really explore more. I do think that that paid off for people who really took advantage of all the advantages of the way we all were operating last year, and the fact that the whole world was operating that way last year. I can't judge anyone who didn't, though. It's a very hard thing to do, and they were completely caught off guard. And so I think that there's a lot of people who reacted differently, and everybody had different situations. We had a lot of students who either got sick themselves or who had family members, and on top of their schoolwork, on top of their job search, and none of that plays into the job search explicitly, but it's all really behind the scenes and having a huge impact on how much energy they can put to it and how they are. And so I think the ones who thrived, there is part luck, that whatever their life circumstances, and there is also part the flexibility and the acceptance, like, okay, this is where we are. How do we make the most of it? I think that the hardest thing for students, the students who stayed longer in the disappointment of it not being the way they expected it to be, and then having to play catch up. And I can't hold that against anybody for having that reaction. It's human nature. But I do think that made it more challenging for students who reacted that way.
Right. So here we are, Ed, with that incoming class, and the fact that you're already starting to think about internships and next year, which implies, of course, that with the class of 2021, you were sitting down with them before they even came to Fuqua, and they had these career goals, they had these expectations, and then boom, the world was turned upside down. So as you look at that sort of arc of the last 2 years, what have you seen in terms of those changing expectations, but also perhaps how that's seen new recruiters, new industries that are coming to the school and looking for your talent?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Matt. And going off of something that Abigail said before, now, first of all, a lot has happened in the last 18 months on top of pandemics, right? But when this all went down, I think there's a lot of an expectation that jobs were going to go away, opportunities were going to go away, everything was going to get harder. And as career services professionals, right or wrong, we start thinking about, well, these are the reasons why we didn't do well this year, right? We can get that going in the back of our heads. And then something interesting happened. Opportunities were still there. Opportunities came up that we were not seeing before. And I found that my narrative, and I'm an optimist by nature, but I found that my narrative for students was less about, these are the 4 reasons why you're not going to do well this year and get around these obstacles. But students, there are opportunities there. They're there for the taking. You have an ability to compete in some races that maybe you didn't have access to before. And so, like Abigail said, some people embraced that and ran with that. And some people, it took them a little bit longer to adjust to how this new, mode of operations was going to work out. So like as the class that just graduated, they saw both, right? They had this in-person experience of what these, employers that are flying to campus all the time, as well as what the virtual one looked like. And they also had something that we didn't mention before, which is how am I going to mentor the first years that have a very different experience than I had? So, we didn't expect there to be a lot of opportunity. There was more than we expected. The bad news didn't really come on the job front. So, I guess we're kind of happy about that. But I would say a lot of the things that we've done to prepare our students to make sure they're successful in any environment really paid off in a year like this. And that's what I fall back to. So when students ask me, what are you going to do if something bad happens? My answer is always kind of the things that we've been doing with you all the time to make sure you're successful in a good environment, a bad environment, the year after you graduate, 5 years down the road.
Right. From that perspective, when we look back at perhaps other economic downturns, Courtney, where recruiters were hesitant, Ed described, there was those ongoing engagement, real determination, and obviously the results that have come from that. Is that something that you observed? And also perhaps, given that things were virtual, how candidates were then able to look for national.
I think it cut out just a little bit on my end. Could you repeat the last part of the question?
Right. So
Yeah,
both the sort of determination of recruiters to continue to engage even through that uncertainty, and then given the virtual environment that we'd adopted, how that sort of opened up opportunities, perhaps nationally or even internationally.
Yeah. I think that, our university being in Cleveland, Ohio, we have a lot of really great relationships with companies in this area that have headquarters here. And so those relationships have always been strong, and we have a lot of great alumni that work at national companies and relationships with these national companies. But during the virtual world we were all living in, we had a lot of opportunities to bring companies onto campus virtually to students that it might have been harder in a normal situation. For example, we have, a number of alumni who work at Amazon. So we were able to do an Amazon panel for our MBA students where they were able to get that one-on-one time networking with them, which would have been a little bit harder logistically in, a normal situation. So I think there were some benefits to being in, the virtual world, as far as being able to connect with more employers with, a little bit more ease of without those logistical challenges. So I do think that, in those cases, we still had a lot of, we had a lot of opportunities that, in-person internships that were turned virtual, but that gave some students the opportunity to intern places they might not normally have been open to geographically. So I do think that, employers and students kind of made the best of it in that situation. We were able to do a lot of virtual engagement with companies and with alumni and with different groups that we would normally meet with in person. And it gave us a little bit more flexibility on scheduling and just really being able to get students in front of these companies and business leaders.
Right. Predictions are always precarious, and if we'd made any 2 years ago, what would have happened to them? But at Yale, for example, Abigail, healthcare, one of the many verticals at the school, with real expertise and excellence, and I guess we've had the demonstration of the important role of healthcare. Are the trends, supply chain, or certain areas of climate finance, as we think about the sustainability in the environment, things that you've really seen emerge and that you think will be very present in the years ahead?
I mean, those are all things that have been consistently growing at Yale. They're two of our largest joint degrees are with public health and with the Yale School of the Environment, which is rare that we have a joint degree with the Yale School of the Environment with a business school. And so we always have a lot of students, and that's definitely just continues to grow beyond just the dual degrees. It's really something, sustainability and different energy opportunities have been interesting to students and continue to be more interesting. I think one of the things this past year that really came to light was that, building on what Courtney was saying, that everything being virtual made students much more flexible about where they wanted to do an internship, and especially because a lot of those organizations are spread out all over the world and may or may not be places that people want to be permanently, and even within the US. And it could be places that they really do want to work. And so having that virtual option really expanded not just who they got to talk to, even if they did want to then move there. I think there were a lot of students who did go to where their internship was for the summer, and they were much more open to exploring opportunities because they first were getting to know the company virtually and interacting, and the company was having a lot more people interact with them because it wasn't just sending one or two people, and it wasn't just a phone call. It was, everything that they were doing was virtual across the world. I think that even playing field also opened up students' eyes because it wasn't, oh, I'm going to be the only one who's doing something remotely, or I'm, or interacting with them remotely, or trying to network remotely. Everybody was. And so I think that kind of made it an even playing field in a way that opened up, especially for sustainability and energy related roles, and healthcare, because many of those are obviously all over as well. And so I think that there was a lot of opportunity. For summer internships also, I think our students, certainly the class of 21 last summer, did a lot of internships related to that intersection between healthcare and business. And there were so many opportunities and things that they probably wouldn't have even thought of before, but because of the pandemic, it was so timely and so pressing, and they were so excited to really leverage that. And so I think there's certainly that becomes a springboard.
Right. I suppose one career opportunity that we are fairly confident of, Ed, is that in the summer next year, a Fuqua MBA comes to the end of his 10-year tenure as the CEO of Apple. and whether or not another Duke graduate will be replacing Tim Cook's shoes. But tech, of course, continues to have a big appetite. Are you seeing any shifts, or even as we look at e-commerce and its continued development, spaces around fintech? What are the sort of emerging opportunities that you think are going to continue to grow in the years ahead?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of them, and we've loved Tim Cook's run. Hopefully, number 2, Jeff Williams, also a Fuqua grad, will slide right in, or Eddie Q, number 3. So we got a lot of Duke going on at Apple. But so one thing that I've noticed this past year with regards to emerging industries is, I would say there was some conservative hiring maybe 12 months ago on the client services side. So I'm talking about consulting and perhaps in some of the banking world. So some of that conservative hiring has led into needs for a whole bunch of people. So all that means is you have a lot of the consultancies, a lot of the banks saying, give me a lot of MBAs. So when you match that demand for a whole bunch of MBAs next to a lot of emerging industries, it can start playing some weird games. And literally that game may sound like, hey, I think I want to give fintech a shot. I don't really know much about it, but I want to give this a whirl. Weird, as it turns out, this company is offering me $165K to keep on learning for a couple of years, and maybe I can do fintech later. So that's something I've been observing. So literally what my prediction is a lot of that pent-up demand for growing in the fintech area, energy, healthcare too, that I keep my eye on as well, have been fairly, even though they have been emerging the last year or so, a lot of that demand's been pent up, if that makes a lot of sense. So you have a lot of students that maybe have been pursuing both that as well as consulting and some of the other client services type of opportunities that they've been led away, if that makes any sense. And hopefully that need from the organizations called like energy and fintech are going to catch up with the student demand of going into it. And sometimes that is aligned with the student risk profile, what they're looking for. And it's not super surprising that in the last 18 months where people didn't want to take a ton of risk, people weren't doing it. So if that's something where people are going to be more open to taking risk in the future, I think you're going to see specifically on the energy side, perhaps fintech. Healthcare has always been a big one, but energy is the one I probably put the biggest bet.
Now, when recruiters knock on the door at Case Western, Courtney, and as Ed described, they say, give me your MBAs. As we've looked at the way working relation, maybe we're working 2 days in the office, 3 days remotely. Do you think that sort of demand for talent has changed in the minds of recruiters, because they're saying, this is a group that's had to adapt. This is a group that's had to be very flexible, with the goals, and they've really learned how to then thrive in this changing workplace?
Yeah, this past fall semester, we've had a lot of employers, reach out to us that we haven't had relationships with before, who are really interested in providing, flexible work arrangements, who, have the opportunity for students to live where they want to and then work virtually. So I think that it's definitely shifting in a more, accepting of that kind of flexible work environment. We have a lot of companies that have reached out to us with hybrid opportunities. So yeah, I definitely think that that's kind of a trend that's going to continue. We're having a lot of employer engagement right now, which seems like a great sign. And during the, during the past year and a half, we've had, this fall semester has been a really big uptick in companies that we haven't had relationships before reaching out to us. So I think that, everybody's adjusting to this, more flexible, more hybrid work model. And we're seeing a lot more opportunities that kind of align with that in our recruiting.
With the constant dialogue, Abigail, that you and your colleagues at Yale have with recruiters, and between McKinsey that says this is what we want, and Amazon says this is what we're looking for, and then a biotech startup that says here are the qualities. How do you then, as a team, kind of assimilate all of that feedback? Because then you've got these hundreds of graduates, and they're very distinct profiles, personalities, skill sets, and sort of work on them almost like a matching process that says, this is why I think you do really well in this sort of environment.
I hope that we don't tell students what to do. I see us sort of this is not an analogy I made up. I actually have heard it many years ago, first when I started working in career services, and I don't know who to attribute it to, but I really do see it as we're the GPS and the students are the driver. And a GPS doesn't take you anywhere if you don't program it. And once you program it, then we can help guide them and course correct. And if there's traffic, tell them, okay, we'll try this other way, and get creative with them how to get to their destination. In terms of figuring out what to program into it, which is what you're asking, that's where we work with them on really asking them the deep questions and working with them through that exploration process, because each of them is so different. And even when they look the same on paper, they have so many different life experiences and motivations driving really what's going to make them thrive, and what kind of environment, what kind of culture, what kind of industry, what kind of skills. And there's no way that we could, I think, optimally say this is what is best for you. I do think that what I see my team's role is really making sure that we are walking through that exploration with you and opening those doors and giving you that process to follow, and asking you the questions and giving you sometimes the wanted feedback and sometimes the not so wanted feedback to really help you make those decisions for yourself, knowing that you're the expert in your life. Each of our students is really the ultimate expert and often knows way more than they realize they know about really where they will thrive and what will make them successful. So, I think that that's more than anything. I think the bigger challenges with employers, how do we make sure that they're marketing themselves to the students who might be interested? And I think employers often think of themselves, and this is starting to change. One of the things that I think has been amazing the last year and a half is really the sort of collision, as I would say, it feels almost like a collision in a great way though, of an explosion of diversity interest in recruiting, as well as virtual everything for the time, for so much of the time. And that has allowed so many new opportunities because employers had an absolute mandate and need to diversify where they were finding talent and what kind of talent they were attracting. And meanwhile, everything being virtual lowers the cost of different schools, and having that diversity of geographies and pools and different kinds of students in such a positive way. And so I think that's one of the huge benefits that's come out of it, and just coincidentally happened to be at the same time. And so it was a really good thing to leverage. I think that's actually the harder part, is how do we actually make sure that there's so much going on for students. They have classes and all these amazing guest speakers and all these incredible student activities and recruiting and trying to figure out what to do with their lives. How do we get them to pay attention to employers that sometimes have amazing opportunities? And it's just, how do we make sure that they don't get lost in the shuffle? And I think that's the biggest thing with employers, is making sure that we work with them and work on their strategy, and how are they reaching out to student clubs? What are they doing with different kinds of students? Are they, for instance, if they are a healthcare consulting firm, making sure that they are really interacting with healthcare students as well as consulting students, as well as probably general management students, and maybe marketing students, depending on what they're doing, and expanding what they're doing, in addition to all the affinity clubs, which employers have been all over the past few years, which I think is great. But there are so many different ways you can slice and dice the diversity question. And I think that employers have really, probably for the first time that I've seen, a really authentic drive to figure out how to do this better, because they realize that even the ones who are really committed to it, they're not where they want to be in terms of their workforce. And how do we partner with them to expand who they're reaching and who they're attracting?
So you introduced that there's the GPS, and then later you talked about the collision, but of course it's a very, very smart GPS that has that sort of the radar system that scans the road, and as you say, then can sort of open up those opportunities, you know, with really exciting employers that might not otherwise be on the radar. So Abigail's given us that first glimpse, Ed, of, you know, the magical work that you and your team do. Maybe you can do double entry accounting in a big classroom, or, you know, learn about mergers and acquisitions, but what you're offering, it's highly personalized, it's very high touch. So give us a sense of, you know, building on what Abigail said, you know, just that personalized journey that you're taking a Fuqua MBA student on.
Yeah, so, you know, if I was to completely overgeneralize our process, you know, similar to a lot of our schools, we offer a career class where all of our students are going to engage and learn a lot of career building skills, but some portion of it's going to be introspection. We're lucky. We have a lot of really great students that have had really great careers before they even got to Fuqua, right? And what we help them tease out are, what are the things that they've been doing in their career that have made them particularly awesome at their jobs so far? Because our hypothesis is that they can identify what those are and train them a little bit, they're going to be really awesome at their next job. The tricky part is articulating what that is and why it's relevant to employers. So without giving away like all of our special sauce, employers are really only looking for 4 things. Yeah, I know Amazon's got a whole bunch of different tenants. McKinsey's got theirs. They're looking for people that can get stuff done, people that can solve difficult problems, people that can lead other people and play well with others. They use a lot of words to describe those 4 things, but that's basically what they're looking for. And the good news is all of the graduates that we've worked with have done those things before. They may have their own way of doing that, but they've all done those things before. So it's super important that people understand what's made them great at their jobs and how they're going to use those at their next jobs. Now, what that next job is, who knows? We're lucky. We've got this buffet of amazing employers that want to hire our students so they can choose, right? But at the same time, I'm not going to put so much pressure on the student such that what they're choosing next is going to be the same thing for the rest of their life. I know that their lives will change. Their priorities will change. What they like and don't like will change. Life circumstances will change. So what we're trying to help them understand is what makes them great now. How can they apply that great thing to a next company for as long as they'd like? And if they need to go do this job search again, you know, with the way they're going to have to do it in 2.6 years, which is the average for every graduate, right? They're going to be ready to do it again. So it's all about introspection, taking that and harnessing it into something that's, you know, understandable for an employer, because this is a communication game. And then hopefully rinse, repeat with a lot of other students so that they're proud of the offer they accepted. Getting jobs isn't the hard part, but finding the thing that's going to work for them, that's the part that's more of a challenge.
Right, right. Courtney, you have the word development in your job title. And what Ed and Abigail have then spoken of, you know, that personal and professional development. So there are a lot of, I guess, hard skills that they're picking up during their time in business school. It strikes me, this is really soft skills, even how to network, how to follow up. Talk us through some of the, the different components where you see that real impact, and students have that, great, and how it even plays to certain strengths perhaps they didn't even realize that they had, or were maybe a little hidden.
Yeah. So we have an emphasis in the MBA program, as most do, on a lot of emotional intelligence and, organizational leadership. So when they first come into the program, we meet with them for a one-on-one intake meeting before they even begin their classes. And we have a smaller program, so we have 35 students currently in each of our cohorts. So we're able to really get to know them one-on-one and, know their past educational experience and professional experience, as well as kind of their goals for the MBA program and post-MBA. So we really start with trying to get to know them as an individual, as other people have mentioned. And then they start in a career and professional development course in their first year. So they focus on a lot of that introspection and soft skills and kind of strategizing where they want to go. And then, as they're going through these classes, they also take a lead course in their first year and a management and action course in their second year, where they can really specialize kind of in business models, Six Sigma and quality management, quantum leadership. So they really get to dig down into those things that make them not only have the analytical skills to be attractive to employers, but also the soft skills and the people skills and working in teams. We do a lot of mock interviews and helping them to network and meet with employers. And I think that really just prepares them for their future career search. So we really see that come through, when they're really passionate about an opportunity and are able to, secure that opportunity. And it's really exciting to see them succeed in their individual goals. So we do get to know our students really well, and that is always a really rewarding part of the process as they go through. And it's really their responsibility to apply for positions, to interview for positions, but we try to prepare them and support them through the process and make them as ready as possible through the career courses, through our supplemental career programming and the different things that we do with employers, so that they feel confident and ready to be able to achieve their individual goals. So it's really good to see them go through that process.
I can imagine. Yeah, the sense of transformation. Some are changing geography, some are changing sectors, some are changing industry, some are changing all three of those things. Abigail, the role that the internship plays, in that initial step that might be building towards a bigger picture out of the MBA program, and perhaps also when they come back from the internship, do you see a change?
Definitely. I think, and I would hope to, and usually we do in lots of different ways. The internship varies a lot, I would say. In some industries, it is becoming more and more crucial in some ways for students to decide sooner, because so many of the full-time offers come out of the internships, and there aren't as many. There are just some industries that have pulled back a lot on the second year full-time recruiting. That said, there are opportunities for those students who are doing something different, or who didn't get what they really wanted for their internship or thought they wanted, and they can use that as a stepping stone, and they can use that to really solidify their steps as they go into, if they're making a significant shift. And I think that all comes down to really, what are the different variables? It is extremely hard for them to shift geography and industry and function all in one jump. Some people can do it, and some people need to have some interim, and sometimes the internship is great to use for that interim piece. I think when they come back, it's a mix. There are always the students who are so excited they have offers. Yay, I said yes, I'm so excited, I'm done. Now, then they become club leaders, and they're really excited to help the next generation and immerse themselves in school in a different way in terms of other kinds of activities. There are other students who get offers and really sit and wait and go through recruiting in the fall and really question, I had a good summer and I'm not sure that this is really what I want, not even just forever. I completely agree with you. We're looking for what's right for now, what's right for next, not what's right for forever, because I certainly don't even know what's right for forever for me. How could I expect my students who are 20 years younger to do that? So, I think that there's, it's important to support them, and we do that, and we make sure that we're reaching out and giving them the space to be okay with that. I think that some of the hardest conversations I've had over the years are with students who, they're not with the students who had a summer experience and didn't get the offer. They are often with the students who had the summer experience, got the offer, and in their gut, they know they don't want it, but it's like the prime brand of the year. And they're like, how do I say no to this? And those are the ones that I sort of feel are as important as everybody. You know, they're all equally important, but those are the ones that I think are especially important to be heard and to know that that's okay and that's valid. And it's important for them to really listen to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good problem to have, but sometimes, you know, sort of almost paralyzed by choice. Perhaps we spoke earlier about a trinity of alum working at Apple right now. The alumni, in a bigger sense, Ed, and even perhaps how they will, you know, then mentor and talk through some of the career options that Abigail was describing. How important are the alumni in both identifying opportunities, but just, again, you know, this journey that we've been describing and the sort of support and insights that they can provide?
Super important from the perspective of maybe first handshake into a new organization to learn more about them from an insider's point of view versus what you can read on a website. Super important from the perspective of some of these alumni are, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 years out. So some of them are looking to make their next moves as well. So there's a lot of different depth of knowledge you can get from the alumni, both how to get in and how you should be thinking about your career once you're there. Working with alumni is a ton of fun. I mean, we work with them as students, right? So it's good to see them back. But it's also, to your question to Abigail on how students have grown between their first and second year after the internship, it's super fun for us to continue to watch that as they grow out after graduation. And so for us to be able to work with that alum and as well work with those alumni to help our current students, that's a pretty amazing circle to watch. But how important are they in the process? I would say very important. I would say from a content perspective, they're very important. And from a comfort perspective, they're extremely important. I coach a lot of our students to talk to everybody, not just Duke and Fuqua alumni. But if someone has some trepidation or is not necessarily comfortable with this whole networking thing, you know, that thing that nobody likes, then feel free to talk to alumni first. That's a warm conversation. They know exactly what you've been through. They care about you. They also care about their employer, but they care about you, which makes this process not easy, but easier if you're a student.
Right. I mean, that wonderful sort of loyalty and caring, but at the same time, very busy individuals. And perhaps whether it's Apple, Amazon, or Alphabet, they might get many people reaching out through LinkedIn or through different networks. So do you have advice in terms of that first step and how to really make it personal so it doesn't feel like it's just another sort of wider email?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a bit cynical on this one because in that if you have an alum that's working for an amazingly fun company, that alum should expect to, receive 5,000 emails from 5,000 gunner MBA students that all want to sound very different from each other. But I'm all about asking honest questions. I'm reaching out to you. I want to learn about this. This is where I'm coming from. This is what I think I want to do next. Can you give me 5 minutes of your awesome time? Who knows what's going to happen next? Maybe you're going to be the first one to jump on that. Maybe they'll reply. Maybe they won't. But for me, I think the quest that I'm sending my students on is less about differentiation and more about being authentic. And where I'm going with this is our students are pretty different from each other anyway. So you're not going to find 2 Duke students next to each other. They're exact the same person. So by definition, they will be differentiated. And that's easier to talk about versus trying to speculate on what this alum that you've never even met before may or may not want to hear. At the end of the day, you're right. They're busy. They may or may not get back to you, but it's pretty common for Duke alumni to say things like, if you're a Duke student, I'm going to give you 15 minutes of my time just because. What happens after minute 16 is up to you, right? But I'm going to give you the first 15 minutes just because.
Right. Yeah. And that authenticity has never let anybody down. Ed was talking, Courtney, about, the alums that themselves might be looking at a career switch 2, 3, 5 years out of the program. And presumably, lots of focus on the internship and then that first position coming out of the MBA, but you are setting them up to manage the rest of their career? I mean, do they sometimes come back and say, you know, there was something that you shared, I didn't know how I was going to use that at first, and then it made sense 3 years later, and this is how I've used it in the next step of my career? You're thinking about the long term and that continued welfare and development.
Yeah, I think that we have, a number of really good engaged alumni that love to come back for events and love to come and talk with students. And we often hear about, specific classes that they took or professors they loved or opportunities that they had while at the school. And we love hearing those. It's great to kind of hear how they've used the skills that they gained in the program to continue their career. We really do try to stay in touch with everyone that we work with because, it's great to keep in touch and see what's going on in their lives. And, we're very lucky to have a number of engaged alumni that continue to come back and continue to stay in touch with us, and also are willing to work with current students and help them with internship opportunities and come back for networking events. And, the opportunity to just stay in touch and provide, advice and career advice to the next generation. We also have, alums who will come back and, ask for help from our career management office, with their job transitions. But the vast majority are really interested in staying engaged with the current students and being able to help wherever possible. I've got an internship opportunity and I'd love to meet with the students who are currently in, the first year of the program. So we have a lot of really great engaged alums who interact with us frequently, and we really enjoy it and to see their progress as they go throughout their career.
Right. One of the admissions directors earlier today was saying, if I had more time in the day, clearly it was a big if. He said, I just love to spend the time to see, what all of these students, now graduates, are doing 5 years, 10 years out, and the remarkable stories and the potential that they'd seen in them in the admissions team at the beginning. So, Abigail, with the many offerings at Yale, sort of the masters in management, specialized masters, pre-experience, just with the dialogue that you have with recruiters, do you think that, if anything, the last 2 years has really reinforced the enduring quality of the MBA for someone that's going to business school 4 or 5 years out of undergrad, and where that places them in the careers market?
I do. I think as Yale has developed different early career programs, I think the value of the MBA actually has become personally clearer to me, because it's very different. The MBA itself is much broader and much more about leadership and holistic view and strategy. And yes, our students graduate and have very detailed technical skills and can get in the weeds, but they also have a much more holistic global view and global skill set, because they've had work experience before, and just because of the nature of what an MBA degree is. And specialized masters tend to be much more specialized, and students going into them know what they want to be using them for, and they're very well set up for that career path. But it doesn't give them as much opportunity to explore and make different moves later in their careers. And I think one of the things that MBAs, and I think what gives an MBA as a degree staying power, and why I think it will continue to have staying power, is it is by far of what I have seen over my career, the best way for people who have been working for a few years to switch gears, to say, you know what, I went down this path, it was right at the time, but I think there's something else there for me. And I feel like I need to learn something. I need to get a different skill set. And it's a way of hitting reset in a really, and filling in a lot of those gaps. So they have a lot more options going forward. And I think that it will continue to be that. If anything, I think that those global skills are going to be more and more needed. Ed was talking in terms of the alumni, but I would argue it is related to everything. That authenticity and communication skills are so key in everything. And whether it's being able to communicate on the very technical details, or with this different strategy or marketing or whatever it is, it applies not just with alumni, it applies with employers, it applies with colleagues. And I think that MBAs are uniquely positioned to really embed that across the curriculum in a way that other degrees, because other degrees' value is often that they are so focused, they don't get to that holistic level.
Right. And I suppose it speaks to, Ed boiled down to getting stuff done, managing complexity, leading others, and, playing in a team. And the MBA your colleagues in admissions, I guess, are already able to identify that sort of potential, which then becomes such a valuable proposition to employers. So if you were to sit down, Ed, with someone that's, well, yeah, I want to go to business school, obviously looking for the right fit, because I mean, you're all great programs, but distinct in your own ways. Perhaps from the careers perspective, what advice would you then have to that applicant about choosing the right program for them and how it fits with their career aspirations?
Yeah, for sure. I'm not so naive to assume that every applicant knows exactly what they want to do. Whether they say it in their essays or not, it's a different story, but they may not know what they want to do. So from a risk management perspective, you almost need to consider schools that have a variety of expertise in different areas, and expertise could be defined by faculty and classes. It could be defined by where graduates have taken jobs, right? So if I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next or which school I should go to, one school of thought says, let's look at some schools that have success balanced, because I'm not really sure which thing on the menu I'm going to want to select anyway. That's one thing to think about. Now, that's not even going to get you very far, right? Because you're going to get down to this list of a whole bunch of schools that all offer a lot of great opportunities and are all talking about their amazing employment report on, the poets and quants article, right? So so they're all gonna be saying some of the same things. From there, you need to start thinking about, there's the practical part, like, are you going to get into all these places, right? Like, you may love them, they may not love you. But you also need to think about what your experience is going to be like there as a student. People talk about transformational versus transactional a lot. I'm not going to judge one way or the other if someone's looking for a transactional experience, but some places are more skewed towards transformational experiences, and some places are more skewed towards transactional. And if that's important to you, that's something that you need to consider. And this is where some of the recruiting in the past year has been a little bit more problematic. It's hard to get that on websites and on Zoom, and easier to get that when you're in person. But that's an important thing to consider. This is a real investment. This is 2 years for some people. It's a short period of time to have the time of your life. It's a long period of time to be unhappy. So to actually experience what your classmates are going to be like, what your professors are going to be like, what your administrators are going to be like, that's a big part of the process as well. After you've whittled down some processes of, the place is higher that I care about? Do they make the kind of cash? Do they sit in the right geographies? I don't know. At some point, if you're going to be spending all that money for 2 years, you better, get a better idea of who your classmates are going to be.
Yeah. So perhaps one final word of advice, Courtney. We've talked about the reinforcement of the value of the MBA, and of course, Ed alluded to career reports and all of the, the great details that they share. Perhaps at a more personal level, do you also just see that? The MBA contributing to a sense of personal fulfillment, personal well-being, because people are really, pursuing their passions, moving ahead in their careers. How do we, kind of capture that at a more emotive level?
Yeah, I think that, as Ed said, some students don't know exactly what they want to do, but, if they're coming into the MBA program, they have the opportunity to experience all the different, classes they'll be able to have. They'll get to experience different concentrations. They'll get to try things out through internships. And I feel like, coming in with some past experience that helps, lend that kind of, through the emotional intelligence and leadership classes that they take as part of, the management portion of an MBA program, they really have to be introspective and learn about themselves. And so I think that really shows through when they're kind of looking for full-time opportunities and looking for, what they want to do post MBA. And so it is really rewarding and emotional to kind of see that process of them, deciding what they want to do with the next step of their career. And so I think that having, the experience of going through an MBA program really gives them the chance to discover that, because they're spending all that time thinking about, what makes me happy in a career? What do I really want to work towards? What are my long-term goals? And so I think that it is emotional and fulfilling when they, decide to go on a path, as a result of the time spent in their MBA program and that introspection.
Right. I have been listening to the three of you so intently learning so much. I've forgotten one of my other roles, of course, is to check on some of the questions that our viewers have been submitting. A couple of them are admissions related, and obviously with the great recording that we had with Bruce's team yesterday. But there's a quick question I should finish with, Abigail, for you, someone that's interested in pursuing the MBA with the MFA, joint degree at Yale, and then think about the media and entertainment industry. So perhaps you're quite specific in industry. Is that an accessible industry for international students?
It depends. It's extremely challenging for international students, and it really depends on your goals. It's worth a further sort of a much more detailed conversation about what your goals really are and what you mean by that, because media and entertainment is so broad. But the quick answer is it is extremely challenging. It doesn't mean it's impossible, and it is it takes a lot of work to find those opportunities.
Right. Well, every time I turn on Netflix, there's any number of Spanish, French programs. So perhaps there's a whole international opportunity embedded in there too. All three of you, thank you. Thank you for an I feel that there were so many nuggets that you shared. I'm going to have to go back and capture some of them. I think it would be great material for an article, but just intrinsically, that sense of optimism. Ed, you said you're an optimistic person. I think all three of you bring that sort of encouragement for everyone that's been following this careers panel. So Abigail, Courtney, Ed, thank you for joining Centre Court. It was lovely to have you with us. Do take care, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.